My fiancée took a break to party with friends. She never expected what I did while she was gone. Hello, read it. My name is Daniel Carter, and if you had asked me a year ago what my future looked like, I would have given you a confident answer. I was 32, well established in my career, financially secure, and engaged to the woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. I wasn't someone who made rash decisions or chased fleeting excitement. My life was built on stability, on careful planning, on the belief that commitment meant something. I had spent years constructing a future that felt unshakable. But the thing about foundations is that they only seem strong until the first crack appears. I never saw it coming. If anything, I had been sure I was one of the lucky ones. Relationships were hard. I knew that, but Jenna and I had made it through everything. We had met in our 20s, back when life was still a blur of late-night study sessions, cheap takeout, and dreams that felt just out of reach. She was the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it, effortlessly charming, always the center of attention. I was quieter, more methodical, the kind of guy who planned everything down to the last detail. We balanced each other out. At least, that's what I thought. We had been together for 5 years when I proposed. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I had spent months planning every detail, choosing the perfect ring, rehearsing the moment in my head over and over. I wanted it to be perfect because Jenna deserved perfect. I proposed at the little cafe where we had our first date, the same place where we had spent hours talking about our hopes and fears, where I had first realized I wanted to spend my life with her. She cried when she said yes. I had never felt more certain of anything. In the months that followed, our lives became a whirlwind of wedding plans, guest lists, and venue tours. It was overwhelming at times, but I didn't mind. I was building something real, something that would last. I ignored the tiny moments that should have made me pause. The way Jenna's excitement would flicker into something else when we talked about the future. The way she hesitated when we discussed settling down. I chalked it up to nerves. Everyone got cold feet before a wedding, right? But looking back, I see now that the cracks had been forming for a long time. It wasn't until a few months before the wedding that the real shift began. It started subtly. Jenna scrolling through Instagram late at night, sighing at pictures of her friends backpacking through Europe, partying in Bali, living lives that seemed untouched by responsibility. She started making comments about how young we still were, how life was moving so fast. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were both in our early 30s. Of course, we had moments of nostalgia for the carefree days of our 20s. But then, the comments became something more. I just feel like we've been so focused on the future, she said one night, absent-mindedly twirling her engagement ring. Like, sometimes I wonder if we're rushing things. Rushing? After 5 years together, after planning a wedding, after building a life that felt as solid as bedrock. She thought we were rushing? Still, I didn't push. I told myself it was normal pre-wedding anxiety. I told myself she just needed reassurance, that once we were married, she'd feel more settled. But then there were the trips. Jenna had always been close with her college friends. Lisa, Megan, and Amy, the kind of people who saw responsibility as something to be avoided at all costs. They were the type who never stayed in one place for long, always chasing the next adventure, the next spontaneous decision that would make for a good story. Over the years, I had learned to tolerate them, even when they made snide remarks about how domestic Jenna's life had become, how they could never imagine settling down so young. A few months before the wedding, they started taking more trips together. Weekend getaways, last-minute vacations, plans made with little thought for anything beyond the immediate thrill. At first, I didn't mind. Everyone needed time with their friends. But as the trips became more frequent, something about the way Jenna acted afterward unsettled me. She would come home restless, distracted, always bringing up stories about how free they all were, how exciting their lives seemed. One night, as we lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Do you ever feel like you missed out on something?" I turned to look at her, frowning. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Just life moves so fast, you know? One minute you're in college, and the next you're planning a wedding. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to just pause, to not have everything figured out." A chill ran through me, though I couldn't explain why. We don't have to have everything figured out, I said carefully. But we're building something together. That's not a bad thing. She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yeah, I know. I should have asked more questions. I should have pressed her, should have forced her to say what she was really thinking. But I didn't. I just rolled over, told myself it was nothing, and fell asleep. It was the last peaceful night I would have for a long time. Because 2 weeks later, Jenna sat me down with a look on her face I had never seen before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something worse. It was guilt. She told me she needed a break. Not because she didn't love me, not because she didn't want to marry me. She just needed time. Time to explore herself, to figure things out, to make sure she was ready before making a lifelong commitment. She promised it wasn't about me, that this was something she had to do for herself. I sat there, listening to the woman I had planned to spend my life with tell me that, despite everything we had built, despite the years we had spent together, she wasn't sure if she was ready to marry me. And then, as if that wasn't devastating enough, she told me her plan. She wasn't just taking a break. She was going to Europe for 4 months. With her college friends, she spoke as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world, as if I should be understanding, supportive, patient. She genuinely believed that I would wait for her, that I would put my life on hold while she went off to find herself. I should have been furious. I should have demanded to know why she thought this was okay, why she had strung me along if she wasn't ready. But I didn't. I just sat there, numb, as the first real crack split through the foundation of everything I had built. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't try to change her mind. I just nodded. And while Jenna packed her bags, dreaming of the adventures that awaited her, I made a decision of my own, one she never saw coming. Jenna's bags were packed and sitting by the door. The apartment, once filled with the scattered remains of our life together. Her shoes kicked off in the hallway, her books left open on the coffee table, the half-drunk cups of tea she always forgot about, felt hollow, stripped down to something unrecognizable. She had spent the past week buzzing with excitement, scrolling through travel blogs, texting her friends about hostels and train routes, completely oblivious to the weight of what she had done. She was leaving, and she expected me to wait. As she stood in front of me, suitcase in hand, I saw it in her eyes, that quiet confidence, the unshaken certainty that when she returned, nothing would have changed. She thought I would still be here, still standing in the same place, still ready to pick up right where we left off. To her, this was temporary, just a pause, a detour before returning to the road she had already mapped out. But what she didn't realize was that something fundamental had already shifted. She walked out of the door without hesitation, without looking back, and I let her go. I didn't chase after her, didn't beg her to stay, didn't ask her to reconsider. I simply watched as she disappeared down the hallway, the echo of her footsteps growing fainter until there was nothing left but silence. And then I got to work. The wedding was the first thing to go. The deposits, the venue, the dress fittings, the honeymoon reservations. It all unraveled in a matter of days. I made the calls, sent the emails, signed the cancellation papers with a hand that barely shook. Every step felt surreal, as if I were dismantling someone else's life, erasing a future that had already been written. But the further I went, the lighter I felt. Then came the apartment. Jenna had never officially been on the lease. When we moved in together, she had been between jobs, and I had taken full responsibility for the paperwork, the rent, the bills. At the time, it had felt natural. I had always been the stable one, the one who made sure things were taken care of. Now, that decision was paying off. I packed up her belongings, sorting through the remnants of our life together with a cold, mechanical efficiency. The clothes she had left behind, the books she never finished, the photos of us that once held so much meaning, they all went into boxes. I dropped them off at her parents' house without a word, left the keys to our apartment on top of the stack, and walked away. And then, I changed the locks. For the first time in 5 years, I was free. At first, the silence was unbearable. I had spent so long structuring my life around Jenna that, without her, everything felt disjointed. Mornings stretched out in an empty space without the sound of her moving around the kitchen, without the small, familiar habits that had once made up my routine. My phone, once constantly buzzing with messages, was silent. The absence of her presence was everywhere, in the gaps she left behind, in the spaces where she used to be. But then something unexpected happened. I started to breathe again. For the first time in years, I wasn't adjusting myself to fit into someone else's expectations. I wasn't compromising, wasn't second-guessing, wasn't trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through my fingers. I went back to the gym, picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had drifted away from. Slowly, piece by piece, I started reclaiming my life. Jenna, meanwhile, was living the dream. Her Instagram became a highlight reel of picturesque landscapes, rooftop bars, sun-drenched beaches. She was in Rome, then Paris, then hopping across the Greek islands, always surrounded by her friends, always grinning at the camera as if she had never been happier. She posted captions about self-discovery, about embracing the journey, about how sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself. She hadn't lost anything. She had simply walked away, expecting that the life she left behind would be waiting for her when she returned. I let her believe it. For weeks, I watched from a distance as she continued on her carefully curated adventure. She still sent me messages, though they became less frequent over time. At first, they were full of excitement. Long paragraphs detailing the places she had seen, the experiences she was having, the things she couldn't wait to tell me about when she got home. Then, they became shorter. A quick check-in, a casual miss you. As if I were nothing more than an afterthought, a reminder of something waiting for her in the future. She never asked how I was doing, never questioned what I was up to. It never occurred to her that while she was moving forward, I had been doing the same. It wasn't until she tried calling that she realized something was wrong. At first, she was confused. My silence wasn't part of the plan. She left voicemails, sent more messages, started tagging me in posts as if that would pull me back into her orbit. But I didn't respond. I let the distance grow. And then the panic set in. Her messages became frantic. She started reaching out to my friends, my family, searching for reassurance that I was still there, still waiting. She called over and over, her missed calls stacking up like unanswered questions. She had gone searching for herself in Europe, and now, for the first time, she was the one who felt lost. I let her sit with it, let her feel the weight of her own choices, the consequences of the moment she had so carelessly walked away. She had expected me to pause my life for her, to keep everything exactly as she left it, waiting for her return like a patient, loyal fixture in her world. But she was about to learn that life doesn't work that way. Because by the time she finally decided to come home, she wasn't coming back to the life she had left behind. She was coming back to nothing. Jenna landed back home 2 months earlier than planned. I knew she was coming before she even stepped foot on the plane. The signs had been building for weeks. Her posts had become sparse, her messages more frequent, her attempts to reach me more desperate. She had started this trip believing she was embarking on some grand adventure, convinced that self-discovery was just a plane ticket away. But reality has a way of catching up with people, especially those who think they can outrun it. At first, I had watched from a distance, observing how the tone of her trip shifted. The early days were filled with excitement. Carefree captions about new beginnings, endless photos of sunlit European streets, late-night rooftop bars, and laughter frozen in time. She was in Rome, then Paris, then Greece. Every post radiated the same manic energy of someone trying to convince the world, and maybe even herself, that she had made the right choice. But then, the cracks started forming. The once daily updates turned into sporadic check-ins. The carefully curated photos stopped featuring her friends as much. She started posting old pictures, ones taken weeks before, as if she were trying to stretch the illusion just a little longer. And then, finally, there was nothing. Silence. That was when I knew. She wasn't coming home because she had finished her journey, because she had found herself in some cobblestone alleyway or picturesque cafe. She was coming home because she had realized she had nowhere else to go. She tried calling me as soon as she landed. I ignored it. Then came the messages. At first, she acted as though nothing had changed. She asked if I was home, if we could talk, if I wanted to grab dinner and catch up. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just the quiet assumption that I would be exactly where she left me, waiting like some forgotten bookmark she could pick up whenever she pleased. I didn't respond. The silence stretched between us, an abyss of her own making, and the longer it lasted, the more her messages changed. The breezy, casual tone gave way to uncertainty, then to frustration, then to something else entirely. That night, she showed up at my apartment. I had expected it. Jenna had always been someone who relied on certainty, on knowing that, no matter what, she had a safety net waiting for her. She had walked away from me with absolute confidence that I would still be there when she returned, that I would forgive, that I would welcome her back with open arms. But when she arrived, her key didn't work. I can only imagine the moment of confusion, the way she must have stared at the lock, trying to make sense of it. She tried again and again, expecting the door to open just as it always had. Then, the realization must have set in. The lock had been changed. The access she had always taken for granted was gone. She knocked, then pounded, then called my name, her voice rising with frustration, confusion, and something else, something that sounded an awful lot like fear. I didn't answer. I wasn't home. Or at least, that's what she thought. I stood in the shadowed corner of my building's parking lot, watching from a distance as she banged on the door, as she paced in frustration, as she called my phone over and over. Her confidence, the careless certainty that she could walk back into my life whenever she pleased, was crumbling right in front of me. And I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no satisfaction. Just the cold realization that whatever love I had once felt for her was gone. She stayed outside for nearly an hour before finally giving up. When she left, it wasn't with the same easy stride she had the day she walked away. No, this time, she moved slowly, shoulders hunched, like someone who had just begun to understand the depth of their mistake. But it wasn't over. The next morning, she was back. This time, she wasn't alone. Jenna's mother had always been a force to be reckoned with. Charming when she wanted to be, manipulative when she needed to be. And now, she was standing at my door, perfectly composed, like a lawyer arriving to negotiate a settlement. She knocked once, then waited. When I finally opened the door, her expression flickered just slightly, as if she hadn't expected me to actually face her. Jenna stood behind her, arms crossed, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her mother spoke first. She had a way of making everything sound reasonable, of twisting words until reality bent in her favor. She told me Jenna had been going through something, that the trip had been necessary for her growth, that she had gained clarity and now realized what truly mattered. She said she hoped I could find it in my heart to understand, to be patient, to give her another chance. She spoke as though I were the one being unreasonable, as though I were the one who had walked away. I let her talk, let her spin her carefully curated narrative. And then, when she was finished, I simply told her the truth. Jenna had made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. Her mother's expression hardened. Jenna, who had remained silent the entire time, finally looked up at me, and for the first time since she had returned, I saw something real in her eyes. Not anger, not entitlement, not frustration. Fear, because in that moment, she understood what she had truly lost. She wasn't just coming back to a locked door. She was coming back to nothing. Her mother tried once more, shifting tactics, appealing to the years we had spent together, to the love that had once existed between us. But it didn't matter. I had given everything to Jenna, and when she decided it wasn't enough, she had expected the world to wait for her. But the world had moved on. I had moved on, and now she was the one left standing in the wreckage of what she had so carelessly thrown away. Jenna and her mother left that day without another word. Her mother had worn an expression of quiet disappointment, but Jenna had looked different, shaken, unsteady, like someone who had just realized they were drowning and had no idea how to swim. It was as if, in that single moment, she understood for the first time that the world didn't revolve around her. She had expected resistance, maybe even anger, but she had never expected to find nothing waiting for her. She didn't give up easily. At first, she pretended as if things weren't over, sending messages designed to pull me back in. Old photos of us. Little reminders of inside jokes, accidental texts meant to spark nostalgia. When that failed, the apologies started. She told me she had made a mistake, that she had been lost, that she hadn't realized how much she truly loved me until it was too late. But the problem was I no longer cared. She had wanted freedom, and I had given it to her. Now, she had to live with it. For a while, she lingered on the edges of my life. Too proud to beg outright, but too desperate to disappear completely. She reached out to my sister, to my friends, always pretending she only wanted to know how I was doing. But it was never about that. She wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for a crack in the door, an opening to squeeze through, a sign that she could still manipulate the situation in her favor. She had walked away on her terms. Now, she wanted to come back the same way. And then she found out about Claire. I had met Claire through mutual friends. Nothing serious at first. Just easy conversation, laughter over drinks, a sense of peace that had been absent from my life for too long. She wasn't like Jenna. She didn't need constant excitement, didn't treat commitment like a cage, didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth just to keep her interested. Everything with her was effortless in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. Jenna must have seen a picture of us together on social media. The reaction was immediate. The quiet, lingering regret transformed into pure venom. The messages changed overnight. No more nostalgia, no more apologies, just rage. She accused me of replacing her, of throwing away 5 years for someone I barely knew. She insisted I had been unfaithful, that I must have met Claire while we were still together, that I had been lying to her all along. It was almost laughable. Jenna, the same woman who had abandoned me to find herself in Europe, was now acting like I was the one who had betrayed her. Then the threat started. She warned me that Claire was just a rebound, that I was making a mistake, that I would regret everything when I realized Jenna was the only woman who truly loved me. When I ignored her, she escalated. She began showing up, first at places she knew I went, then outside my apartment. She never knocked, never called when she was there, just lurked in the background, watching, waiting. One night, Claire and I were walking out of a restaurant when I saw her. She was standing on the opposite side of the street, half hidden behind a row of parked cars, staring at us like a predator tracking its prey. The moment she realized I had seen her, she turned and walked away, vanishing into the night. Claire noticed my tension immediately. She asked if I was okay, if something was wrong, but I didn't want to pull her into this mess. I told her it was nothing, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. A few days later, I came home to find my car keyed. Long, jagged scratches ran across the side, deep enough to carve into the paint. There was no note, no proof of who had done it, but I didn't need any. I knew. The next morning, I woke up to over a dozen missed calls from an unknown number. Voicemails filled with heavy breathing, with silence that stretched just long enough to be unsettling, with soft whispers I could barely make out. And then, buried at the end of them, a single, chilling message. You think this is over? It's not. That was when I realized Jenna had snapped. I had seen her angry before, but this was different. This wasn't just jealousy. This was obsession. She had convinced herself that I was hers, that I had no right to move on, that she could manipulate me back in her arms if she just pushed hard enough. She wasn't mourning the loss of our relationship. She was furious that she had lost control. I blocked her number, told my friends not to tell her anything about my life, changed my usual routes, started watching my surroundings more closely, made sure Claire was never alone when we went out together. Then one night, I came home to find my apartment door slightly open. Every muscle in my body tensed. I knew I had locked it before leaving. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the space, heart pounding in my chest. Nothing looked out of place. No shattered glass, no obvious signs of a break-in. But then I saw it. Sitting on the coffee table, placed there deliberately, was a single Polaroid photo. It was of me and Claire, taken just days before. I stared at it, my pulse hammering in my ears. She had been following us, taking pictures, watching. The air in the apartment felt suffocating, heavy with the realization of what this meant. She had been inside my home. She had crossed a line she could never come back from. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. The next time Jenna tried to contact me, It wasn't through messages or voicemails. It was through a lawyer. She had been served with a restraining order. And just like that, the final thread between us was cut. The last I heard, she had left town. Maybe she thought if she put enough distance between us, she could rewrite the story in her mind, convince herself that I had been the villain all along. That was fine. Let her. I didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I was free. And Jenna? Jenna was just a ghost in my past. Jenna was gone. The restraining order ensured that. It was the last tether between us, a cold, legal barrier that left no room for misinterpretation. She couldn't call, couldn't message, couldn't show up at my apartment or my job without immediate consequences. For the first time since she had walked away to find herself, I had complete control over my life again. And yet, even with that chapter officially closed, her presence lingered like a stain that refused to fade. For weeks, I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to catch a glimpse of her watching from the shadows. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and took different routes home just in case she was still lurking somewhere out there. Rationally, I knew she was gone. Her parents had confirmed that she had left town, and mutual friends claimed she was staying with an aunt in another state, trying to get her life together. But the damage was already done. I had seen what she was capable of, and it would take time to unlearn that paranoia. Claire was patient with me. She never pried, never pushed, but she could see the weight Jenna had left behind. Some nights, I'd catch her watching me, her brows slightly furrowed, as if she was waiting for me to exhale, to finally believe that it was over. But that's the thing about people like Jenna. Even when they're gone, they leave echoes of themselves behind. And then, just when I thought I was free, Jenna sent one final message. It came through my work email, one account I had forgotten to block her on. No subject line, just an empty email with a single attachment. A video. I hesitated before opening it, already knowing it would be a mistake. But curiosity won over logic, and I clicked play. Jenna was sitting on a hotel bed, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled, a far cry from the confident, put-together woman who had once believed the world was hers to control. She took a shaky breath, then started speaking. She didn't scream or accuse or lash out like she had in the past. She didn't beg me to take her back. Instead, she spoke slowly, methodically, as if she had rehearsed this moment over and over in her mind. She told me she understood now, that she had lost me the moment she walked away, that all the months she had spent trying to win me back had only made it clearer that she had destroyed the one thing that had ever truly mattered to her. She admitted that she had followed me, that she had broken into my apartment, that she had taken the photo and left it there, hoping it would scare me enough to make me talk to her again. But when it didn't work, when the restraining order arrived, she realized she had lost the game she had spent so long playing. Then, she said something that sent a chill through me. I used to think that if I just waited long enough, you'd miss me. That one day, I'd wake up and see your name on my phone, and it would mean I still had a chance. But now I know you'll never call, and I don't know what to do with that. The video ended abruptly. No goodbye, no explanation, just static silence that stretched far longer than it should have. I stared at the screen, unsure what I was supposed to feel. Was this another manipulation? A final desperate attempt to make me worry about her? Or was this something else? Something real? I didn't know, and I didn't care to find out. I deleted the email and blocked her work account, making sure there were no more loose ends. I didn't respond. I didn't reach out to mutual friends to see how she was doing. I didn't ask if she was okay, because I wasn't her lifeline anymore. That was someone else's burden to bear. And just like that, Jenna Carter became nothing more than a name in my past. From that moment forward, she ceased to exist to me. The weeks turned into months. The tension that had lingered for so long started to ease. My life settled into something steady, something peaceful. Claire and I grew closer. It wasn't some grand, dramatic love story. It was something quieter, something real. A relationship built on trust, not fear. On love, not obligation. One night, we sat on my apartment balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance, the air thick with the warmth of summer. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder, exhaling softly, as if she could feel the weight of everything I had been through finally beginning to lift. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe. Jenna had taken so much from me. Years of my life, my sense of security, my belief in love itself. But she hadn't won. She hadn't destroyed me. She had been nothing more than a painful lesson, a reminder of the kind of love I never wanted again. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to wonder what happened to her, because in the end, she had done this to herself. And as I sat there, with someone who truly saw me, truly valued me, I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. For the first time in years, I was free. And Jenna Carter? She was nothing more than a ghost.